Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we're starting here the Akdama to Masechta Biכורים. So before we even start, we'll just mention that the Torah mentions the mitzvah of Biכורים 4 different places. Once in Parshas Mishpatim, Parachav Gimel, Pasuk Yud Tes, Reishis Biכורי ad Mascha Tavi Beis Hashem Alekecha, the first of the ripening fruits of your land, you shall bring to the Beis HaMikdash, Beis Hashem Alekecha, the Hemshech HaPasuk is L'Savash L'Kediba Chalev Imoy. So obviously this Torah to understand what the connection between these two mitzvahs are. Zogt Rashi, Af HaShviyas Chayev is Biכורים. Shviyas, the pairs that grow during Shemitah, are also Mechuyev and Biכורים. L'kach Nemar Af Kan Biכורי ad Mascha. That's why it says over here also Biכורי ad Mascha. Keitzad, what's the mitzvah? Adam Nichnas L'Seich Sadeh, what person goes into his field, Raya to Enoshe Bikra. He sees a fig that got ripe, Kerechla Gemi, he ties a ribbon around it, L'Simen. This is where we're going to see Mitzvah at the beginning of Parag Gimel, who Makdisha, and it's Makdisha for Biכורים. Ve'ein Biכורים el mishavas hamina. Biכורים is only from the shavas hamina ma'amur. B'mikra eretz chitus erev v'gleimer. Obviously, the mitzvah is the shavas hamina, as we'll see throughout the Masechta, and what exactly it is. The second place that we have the mitzvah Biכורים, the Torah teaches us, is the end of Parshas Kisisa, the same lashon hapasuk, Parak Lamedalad, Pasuk Chavav, V'reishis Biכורי ad Mascha, Tavi Beis Hashem Alekecha, L'Savash L'Kediba Chalev Imoy. Again, this connection between L'Savash L'Kediba Chalev Imoy. So Rashi over here, Mishivas Hamina Ma'amurim B'Shvach Artzecha, Eretz Chitus Eri Gefen Dvash Dvash Tamar. Rashi says it a little bit different. Rashi over here is not mafarish how to do the mitzvah. Rashi just saying which pairs it's coming from. And Rashi explains that Dvash is Dvash Tamar. So the question over here is, why does Rashi have to speak that out? I'll call Panim, that's a question of itself. The Yerushalmi discusses this, and Mitzvah will discuss it in the proper place. Now, the third time the Torah mentions it is in Parshas Korach, in Parak Yud Ches, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Over there's a discussion about the Matnas Kahuna. What are the mitzvahs of all the Chavdal Matnas Kahuna? And one of the psukim over here is Pasuk Yud Gimel, Bikurei Kol Asher Ba'artzam Asher Yaviu L'Hashem L'Cho Yiyeh. The first ripened fruits of anything that grows in your land, anything that has a shvacha oretz on it, these zayin peris, asher yaviu l'Hashem l'cho yiyeh, when you'll bring it to Hashem, it will go to the kohen. Kol tahar b'veisecha yechlenu. Anyone who's tahar in your household may eat it. There is no Rashi over here, but then the ikar mokum of the description of how to be mekayim the mitzvah and the yesod of what this mitzvah is all about is in the beginning of Parshas Kisavai, which is in and of itself a chelik of the mitzvah, because there's a mitzvah of mikra Biכורים. Besides the actual bringing the peiros to the Beis HaMikdash, there's also a chiyuv for the person who's bringing the Biכורים to read the parsha of Biכורים, which a big chelik of it is what we darshan in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, and this is what it is. So it's 11 psukim long. It's a whole parsha in the Torah from the beginning of Parshas Kisavai, the first 11 psukim. So let's go through these psukim with Rashi to understand a little bit of what we're doing over here. So Rashi, so it will be when you enter the land that Hashem Alekecha gives you as inheritance, and you'll be Yerushet, and you'll chase out the goyim, you'll be able to be Yerushet, and you will dwell in it, Yeshavta ba. So Rashi, Magid Shlein Eschev will be Biכורים Matra Kovshus Arts V'Chelkua. This pasuk is coming to teach you that they weren't mechuyev and Biכורים until they conquered the land and divided it up properly to the Shvatim, which we know from the Gemara, it took 7 years to conquer the land, and it took another 7 years to be chelik, Sheva Shekivshuv, Sheva Shechilku, and that's when they were mechuyev in Biכורים. Pasuk Beis, V'lokach dam ereishis kol pri adama, you should take from the first of the fruits of the land, asher tavi me'artzecha, that come from your land, asher Hashem lekecha noisen lach, that Hashem has given you. You shall place it in a basket. And you will go with them to the place that Hashem has chosen to rest His name over there, to where Akash Baruch Hu is going to be Mashra the Shechina. Zok Rashi, Mereishis v'loy kol reishis. Not all first fruits. She'ein kol peiros chayav meBiכורים. Not all peiros are chayav meBiכורים. Ela zayin aminim b'lvad. Only the shivas aminim. Nemar kan eretz v'nemar lalon eretz chitus eretz. Just like the pasuk says over here, eretz. It says by the Shivas Aminim also, Eretz Chitus Ha'ira, Mala Halam Mizayin Aminim Shem Shtabach Ben Eretz Yisrael. Just like over there, the pasuk is talking about specifically these pairs that Eretz Yisrael is Shtabach Behem. So too, Avkan by Biכורים Shalach Eretz Yisrael Shein Zayin Aminim. So too over here, the Shalach of Eretz Yisrael, which are the Shivas Aminim. Zeis Shemen, Zayis Agrisha Shamna Ogur B'Seicher. Juicy olives, it's called Zeis Shemen because these olives are very good for making oil. Not to eat, not for the olives to be eaten by itself, but to be used as oil. Udvash Dvarm, like Rashi's and Parshas Kisisa. Meirashis. Now this is Rashi's going back to what Rashi originally was Mefarish in the beginning of in Parshas Mishpatim. Adam Yared L'Sech Sadevarei Ta'inish Bikur Karechalav Gami L'Sim, and he ties a ribbon around the first simon Va'ema Harei Bikurim, and he's Shame, and he says this is Bikurim. Now the Parshas says it's going to be Kadosh even if he is not Shame, but L'Mitzvah he's able to be Shame, and we will discuss this in Mitzvah Shem. Pasuk Gimel. I just want to point out one more nakud in the pasuk. We're going to see later on in the Mishnayos that they made a procession from wherever they were, from throughout Yerushalayim till they got to the Har Bayis, till they got to the Beis Hamikdash, and they made a very big deal. I think this comes from the pasuk that says v'halachta el hamakom, you should go to the place asher yivchar Hashem elokecha l'shaken shmei sham, that there's a hiluch, there's a mahalach to go to the place. It's not just bring the bikurim, it's the actual going. It's like Halil Regel, the actual going up is a chelik of the mitzvah, to be mahadr in the mitzvah upon him. Pasuk Gimel. Uvasa l'koyin sheyeh bayom mehem, you should bring it to the koyin that will be at that time. So obviously you can bring it to the koyin at that time. We're not talking about time travel over here. But Marta Elov, and you will tell him the following: Higadati hayom l'Hashem l'kecha. I'm going to tell Hashem today, Kivarsi l'Aretz, that I came to Eretz Yisrael, Shenish b'Hashem l'Aveseinu l'Asislanu, that Hashem made a shvuah to our fathers to give it to us. Zok Rashi. You have to bring it to a Kayan who's in your days the way that he is. Meaning maybe he'll say that in previous generations there were bigger Kahanim, the Kahanim were on a much higher Madrega, and now it's Pasnish that I should bring it to a Kayan that's on a lower Madrega. The way that he is now, it doesn't matter, don't judge, don't be done, just give it to him the way that he is now. What's a pshat in the mitzvah of Mikra Bikkhurim? The reason is because if a person, many mitzvahs, Bichlal, the Ramban talks about the end of Parashas Bo, it's all about being makir teva to Rabbeinu Shalom. So we bring the first fruits to Rabbeinu Shalom to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu how grateful we are that we were zeicha to have these peiros. Higadati hayoim pama achas b'shana v'lo shtei pamim. Higadati hayoim means once a year and not twice a year. The question is why? What's the pshat in this halacha? So because it's Bikurim, it's dafka the first fruits. Even if this same min will have another, he has 2 bushes, let's say, he'll have another one, but being that he already brought from that min, he's not going to be mechuyev to bring another one. Pasuk Dalet, v'lokach hakoyin atena miyadecha, the kohen will take the basket from your hands, v'yinichei l'fnei mizbach Hashem elokecha, and will place it in front of the mizbeach of Hashem elokecha. So why is he taking the basket? Zok Rashi l'honen foisai to do tnufa, kohen minich yodoi tachas yad habaylim u'meinef. The kohen places his hands under the hands of the Bailam, and they do tnufa, they're Milo, Merid, Meviu, Moilech, La'abaruchas Ha'oretz, La'abaruchas Hashemayim. You wave it around, similar to the Nanum that we do with the Lulav and Esrig. Now, on Sukkot, we don't really have tnufa by other mitzvahs anymore. By the Kabbanis, a lot of times they do tnufa, they would wave it around, and it's big chiluk of the mitzvah over here as well. So, V'lokach ha'koyin atena miyadecha, Zok Rashi, this is teaching us that you have to do tnufa, and then after tnufa, the koyin, the Bailam would place it in front of the Mizbeach. Pasuk Hey va'anisa va'amarta l'fnei Hashem elokecha arami ovid avi v'yered mitzrayim v'yogar sham imsei ma'at v'hisham l'gogod l'otzim v'rav. Then you should call out and say before Hashem, Arami ovid avi, the Arami tried to destroy my father, and he went down to Mitzrayim, and he lived there. V'yogar sham, b'msei ma'at means few in number, and there he became a nation great, strong, and numerous. So Rashi va'anisa is lashon haramas koil, to say it out loud, you don't say it quietly. Arami Eved Avi. What are we doing over here? It's like Rashi, we're mazkir chasdei hamalkam, we're mentioning and we're speaking out the great chasadim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did to us. Arami Eved Avi was Lavan bikesh lakaras hakoil. Lavan wanted to destroy everything. He wanted to uproot everything. Sherad v'achei Yaakov, and he chased after Yaakov Avinu. Even though he didn't touch him, he didn't do anything, but because he thought about doing it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu views it as if he harmed him. When it comes to Ivdei Kechavim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers a machshava like a ma'isa. I'll just take a minute to explain what this means for a second. By Klal Yisrael, the default setting of Yidden is to do the Ratzon Hashem, which means that if they have a machshava chishav lasses mitzvah v'nenas ma'ala lavakasav kilu asa, if a person was not able to had an oinus, wasn't able to be mekayim mitzvah properly, it's ma'ala lavakasav kilu asa. When it comes to avera, Hakadosh Baruch Hu is not mitzaref machshava l'maisa. If a person, let's say, tried to do avera and was nenas, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't consider it as if he did the avera only when it comes to doing a mitzvah. Because the default setting of a yid is to do the Ratzon Hashem. But by Goyim, the default setting is to do fakert what Rabbein Shalom wants. When they want to do something to a yidden, and even if they don't do it, it's ma'ala l'hakasav kilu they did do it. Vayered Mitzrayma, Zok Rashi, va'oira cherem bo'u aleinu l'chaleseinu. Not just Mitzrayim, but many other nations stood up against us to try to destroy us. Shachar is Yer Yaakov Mitzrayim. Laban tried to destroy him. Mitzrayim tried to destroy us. And we're still here. It was B'shivim Nefesh, small number, and we left. It was Shishim Riba between the ages of 20 and 60. Pasuk Vav, Vayoreu Oisonu HaMitzrim, Vayanunu, Vayitnu Aleinu Avodah Kasha. The Egyptians mistreated us and afflicted us and placed hard work upon us. And we darshan this in the Haggadah Shal Pesach. V'nitzak el Hashem Elikei Abeisenu, and we cried out to Hashem, the God of our forefathers, and Hashem heard our voice and saw our affliction. And Vayar V'nitzak el Hashem Elikei Abeisenu, V'yishma Hashem es Keleinu Vayar es Anyenu, Ves Amoleinu, Ves Lachatzenu. How do we touch these three different things? We cried out to Hashem Elikei Abeisenu. We typhus umnus aviseinu b'yadenu because the tefillah we got from our forefathers, but it's also that HaKadosh Baruch Hu heard us and we sounded like the children of the Avos. Hashem responded to that. Vayishma Hashem es keleinu, Hashem heard our voice. Vayaris and Yenu, he saw our pain. Ves amoleinu. Amoleinu is the amal, the hard work. Ves lachatzenu, and the pressure we were under, the oppression that we were under. Pasuk Ches. Vayitzeinu Hashem miMitzrayim v'yod chazaka v'zernituyu v'mayir gadol v'eitzes v'moisen. Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim v'yod chazaka, with a strong arm, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, v'mayir gadol, with a great awesomeness, v'eitzes v'moisen, with signs and with wonders. Pasuk Tes v'yiviyenu l'makom hazeh. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought us to this place, to Eretz Yisrael. V'yitan lanu v'sa'aretz hazois eretz zav ha'schol v'dvash. And Hashem brought us to this place. He gave us this land, which is a land flowing with milk and honey. So Rashi al Hamokim Hazeh, Zeh Beis Hamikdash. The Mokim that we're referring to over here isn't just Eretz Yisrael, but it's Beis Hamikdash, because the Iker Tafkid of getting to Eretz Yisrael was to have a Mokim of Avodas Hashem, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu when Mitzrayim Tavdim Selikim Alahor Hazeh. The tachlis of Yitzis Mitzrayim was be to get to Matan Torah. The tachlis of going out of the Midbar was to get to Eretz Yisrael, to the Mokim HaMikdash. V'yitan lanu v'sa'aretz k'mashmoi. K'pshutai, simply that Hashem gave us a land for it to be ours. Pasuk Yud. V'ata hine heveis yisreishis priya adama shenosata li Hashem. Meaning we're tracing the history of Eretz Yisrael. This is what happened from Aram Yeved Avi until we're holding today. V'ata, and now hine heveis yisreishis priya adama shenosata li Hashem. And now behold, I have brought the first fruit to the ground that you have given me, Hashem. V'yinachta l'fnei Hashem alekecha, and you should place it before Hashem. And you should bow down, you should prostrate yourself in front of Hashem alekecha. You take it after you did Tnufa and Hanacha with the Kayin, that the Yisrael the Biden picks it up again, and he says the Parashat Bikurim, and does Tnufa again. And you should rejoice with all the goodness that Hashem has given to you and your household. You and the Levi and the stranger who is in your midst. The ger is referring to a ger. Like Rashi, the only time you read the parasha of Bikurim when you bring Bikurim is Bizman Simcha Me'atzer Svar Achag, from Shavuos till Sukkot, Sh'adam Lakit V'asai, because Sukkot is Chag HaOsif, that's when a person gathers in all his fruits, that's when a person starts being the Lakit is Tfuah, who Pereis Avigena Geshamnoi, his grains and his fruits and his wines and his oils. Av Me'achag Ve'elach Me'vi Ein Karim. Chag Ve'ad Chanukah, we're going to see in the Mishnah that he could bring Bikurim, but he doesn't do mikra bikurim. Atav ha'levi, af ha'levi chayv bikurim not to b'seich hareya. If a lady has, the Levim didn't have a chelak in Eretz Yisrael the same way that the rest of Klal Yisrael did. They had specific cities where they lived in other people's chelaks. So if a Levi plants and grows first fruits, he has to bring that as bikurim. A ger, so he can't say, he can bring bikurim, but he can't do the mikra bikurim because he's not able to say lavei seinu. Now we paskin, and we're going to see in the Mishnah, so we'll discuss this later. We paskin that a ger is able to say lavei seinu, and he is part of Klal Yisrael just as much as everyone else is. The Torah commands that an owner of a land in Eretz Yisrael to designate the first fruits that emerge each year, and then after they've ripened, bring them to the Beis Hamikdash and give them to the Kohanim. These fruits are known as Bikurim, based on the pasuk that refers to them as Reishis Bikuri Ad Mascha Tavi Beis Hashem Alekecha. When he gets to the Beis Hamikdash, he says the psukim from Aram Yevid Avi, from pasuk Hey through pasuk Yud, that we just read, in which he thanks Hashem for having given him the land he owns in Eretz Yisrael and the produce that grows there. He then sets down the Bikurim next to the Mezbeach, and they're distributed to the Kohanim serving in the Beis Hamikdash to be eaten by them and the families. The halachas of Bikurim apply only to the Shivas Haminim that Eretz Yisrael was nishtabeach behem: wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. The Torah also requires that Bikurim fruits be of good quality. One who owns such fruits as well as land on which they grow is mechuyev to observe all the halachas of Bikurim. Fruit should be designated as Bikurim when they start ripening, as we saw in Rashi, and twice, and as the Mishnah is going to say at the beginning of Parag Gimel. A person goes down into his field and sees a fig that has begun to ripen, or a cluster of grapes that has begun to ripen, or a pomegranate that has begun to ripen. He ties it with a reed or a ribbon, and he says these are Bikurim. This is the preferred method of designating Bikurim. If the first ripening fruits were not designated before they were harvested, they can be designated later. Similarly, although it's preferable to designate the first fruits to emerge, if the later ripening fruits were designated instead, they are valid Bikurim also. In Perek Beis, we're going to see that there's no minimum shear, and one may designate even the smallest amount of each min as Bikurim. However, the Rambam paskins that midrabanan one must designate at least 1/60th, because it would have the same din as Truma, that the Kedushas Bikurim, the Kedushas Haperis, has the same as Truma and Chala. They're all referred to in the Torah as Reishis. The Bailam of Bikurim is required to bring them to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Chatzar, where he gives them to a Kohen. If the Bikurim gets lost or damaged before entering the Beis Hamikdash, he must bring others instead. This is we're going to discuss at the end of the first paragraph. The season for bringing Bikurim begins by Shavuos. Between Shavuos and Sukkot, one brings Bikurim and says the parashas Mikra Bikurim. Once Sukkot arrives, however, the parasha is not recited. From Chanukah and on, Bikurim is not brought at all. One who owns Bikurim could fulfill his chiyuv by bringing them to the Beis Hamikdash on his own, but this is not the preferred course of action. He should rather travel with other Bikurim owners. As we said before, it comes from the pasuk of V'halachta, and by performing the mitzvah in a large group, they honor HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like the pasuk says, B'rov am hadras melech, with many people is the glory of the king. To make much more of a matzav out of doing the mitzvah, to do it together. Any mitzvah that you do, I shouldn't say any mitzvah that you do, but many mitzvahs, it's supposed to be done with a great procession and great excitement. The Torah commands an owner of Bikurim to recite a certain parasha from the beginning of Parashas Kisavai, from Perek Hey to Perek Yud. This passage gives an outline of Jewish history, including how HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved us from the Shibud and Mitzrayim and brought us to an Eretz Zavos Chalav Dvash. And it ends off, and now behold, I've brought the first fruit of the ground you have given me, Hashem. The purpose of reciting this passage is to show that Eretz Yisrael could have never been given to the Yidden without the nisim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was doing for us from the beginning of time until now. By reciting this pasuk, these psukim, the farmer, the Bailam, shows his gratitude, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for having awarded him the land he owns in Eretz Yisrael and the produce that grew there. The Rambam in Hilchos Bikurim Perek Gimel describes the Beis Hamikdash, the Seder or Avodah of Bikurim, as follows. In the Chatzar of Beis Hamikdash, the owner stands with his basket of Bikurim. Bikurim must be brought into Yerushalayim and presented to the Kohen in a basket or another keli, like the pasuk says, "V'samta batena." Tena is a basket. and he carries it on his shoulder, and he says to the kohen that's there, I declare today to Hashem, your God, that I've come to the land that Hashem swore to our forefathers to give to us. He takes the basket down from his shoulder and holds it by its rim. The kohen puts his hands underneath the basket, and they move it to and fro in all directions, up and down. That's called tenufa. After this, the owner recites the second part of the parasha, Arami Eved Avi, which is referring to Lavan, which is the mikra bikurim from pasuk Tes. He puts the basket down next to the mizbeach, does a hishtachava on the floor of the chatzar, and then he leaves. Following the ceremony that we just mentioned, the bikurim are divided among the kehanim serving in the Beis HaMikdash that week. Bikurim are one of the Chav Dalet Matnas Kahun. An owner of bikurim must also bring karbanos together with it. These karbanos, however, are not part of the bikurim ceremony. One may offer them any time during his stay in Yerushalayim, because after bringing bikurim, one must spend the night in Yerushalayim and not travel elsewhere until the next day, as we're going to see in Perek Beis. In fact, anyone who brings a korban in the Beis HaMikdash must spend that night in Yerushalayim. Therefore, somebody who brings bikurim should have to stay overnight in any event on account of his karbanos. The Yerushalmi teaches that even if one fails to bring the karbanos, or he offered them the day before, he must still stay in Yerushalayim the night after bikurim. Meaning bikurim, it's not just enough to bring bikurim, but also he has to be mekayim the mitzvah of lina, which is sleeping over in Yerushalayim that evening, that night. The Torah refers to bikurim as trumas yodecha, the truma of your hands. From here we learn that bikurim have the same kedusha as truma. As such, they may be eaten only by a kohen and the members of his household, and only when he's tahar. Should a kohen who is tamei or a non-kohen eat bikurim, he's mechuyev misa b'dei shamayim, as we learned by truma and by challah. There's the Issa Deraisa against eating bikurim outside Yerushalayim. This Issa applies even to Kehanim. Furthermore, even Kehanim are also to eat bikurim until they had the Hanacha next to the Mizbeach. And if you're over on any of the Kohen is over in any of these Isurim, then he's going to be Mechuyev Malchus. Now, the Pasuk Yud Aleph says, "V'samachta b'chol ha'tova she'nasa l'cha Hashem elekecha." You shall rejoice with all the goodness that Hashem has given you. The third parak of the Masechta relates that the groups, the chaburas of bikurim owners, traveled to Yerushalayim, traveled to the Beis HaMikdash with a lot of simcha and celebration. An ox with gold-covered horns and a wreath of olives on his head would walk at the head of the procession, and they would have a flute playing. They sang as they journeyed a different song for each stage of the trip. They would say different psukim, different mizmarim of Tehillim, as the Yerushalmi speaks out. When they neared Yerushalayim, the leaders of the Kehanim and officials of the Beis HaMikdash would go out and greet them. When they entered the city, the Bali Umnis would stop working. The Bali Umnis would stop working. The workers would stop working to stand in their honor and welcome them. And when they reached the Chatar of the Beis HaMikdash, the Leviim would break out in song. The halachos of bikurim apply only when the Beis HaMikdash is standing. It is our prayer, it is our tefillah and ratzon, that by learning Masechta, we'll be getting closer to the day which we'll be able to be mekayim b'samachta chol ha'tova she'nosan l'cha Hashem lekecha b'binyan beis hamikdash hashlishi b'mehera v'yameinu amen.